you have been a continuing source of inspiration for me, and I always look forward to her next record.
I appreciate that. Yeah, they're pretty few and far between, but
yeah. Especially there was a big gap until that record came out. I think at least it felt big.
That was about 8. Yeah, that was about 8 years. So
yeah.
if it felt long, then yeah, it was.
I was starving. I was starving, man. Because I think in the meantime I had gotten a chance to play with Ted Poor. And he told me that you guys had been recording something and that you were in the process of mixing it or then adding a choir on top of it. I don't know what the process was exactly, but he told me...
Yeah, well, let's just say it wasn't all done live in the studio.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one, it just took a long time because I'm super slow with everything. It takes me a long time to write, and a lot of these tunes are pretty long form. So the more notes, the longer it's going to take me.
Mm-hmm.
Another complicating factor was Skuli Sversen, who played on, probably about half of the record, left the country sort of halfway through the project just because it was taking so long and he had, other plans. And so, luckily I was able to get John Patitucci to do the rest of it. So I was very fortunate, but it just, meant that it took extra time.
Yeah, I wonder, when you compose these big form pieces, or how did you arrive in the first place at allowing yourself to continue a piece, not saying, okay, that's it, this is what I got, I have 1 page, I have 2 pages. How did you get into the process of really, staying with an idea and then exploring it in so many ways?
Well, it's exactly that. It's just committing to an idea and seeing what the idea really wants to be, and exploring every possible avenue that the idea could take, and then mapping out a form more or less. That helps me to do that before I start, and then just sort of filling in the gaps.
So in a way, you're constructing a roadmap on where the composition will go, as a structurally, or
as I'm developing, as I'm getting ideas and encounter ideas, I'm also forming a form, and the form will, it always changes, but it's just good to kind of have an overview of what the thing is going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
And I really never set out to write a 15 or 25 minute piece. That's not ever a conscious goal of mine.
Sure.
But it just seems like this idea wants to go through this journey and here, and sometimes it's really super long,
mm-hmm.
relatively, and sometimes it's just like half a page.
So when do you commit your tunes to, or your ideas to paper? How is your process? Maybe you can get a little further into what's actually happening when you compose.
Some of the solo guitar pieces I don't write out ever, or I eventually, when I put out a couple of books, and I wanted to include some of the solo pieces, but I had to sort of relearn them and then transcribe them. For some reason, maybe because I'm lazy, I just don't write them out. I spend so much time writing it that it just lodges itself in my memory, whether I want it or not.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll write out like sketches and ideas as I'm writing so that I don't, forget, especially lately, because I pretty much forget everything now. So I'm writing out a lot more stuff than I used to. But the ensemble pieces, I generally write them out as I go. But they tend to be on just like 100 scraps of paper for a long time until I realized, well, someone else other than me is going to have to make sense of this. So that point, put it in some kind of readable form.
Do you write it on the computer then, or by hand?
No, by hand.
Yeah.
I tried Sibelius once, and I don't know, I just didn't like it.
Yeah,
I'm probably the last person on earth.
I'm with you.
To not use. Oh, well, good. We're the last two.
Yeah.
Great. But I really enjoy just the process of, putting a pencil on paper, and
yeah. There's a magic to it.
Yeah, I like to think that I'd write differently that way. Maybe not, but I like the tactile sensation of that process, and I enjoy trying to write things neatly. It's like I'm not at all a visual artist. Like I have zero artistic talent, but I do enjoy sort of making something that looks nice.
Yeah.
When I put it in final form, of course, then I do hire somebody to put it in finale for me. So I'm the only one that'll ever see the manuscript, but it's okay.
Unless you're going to share them with me, maybe.
I could do that. Sure.
I'd love to see it. I have your book, but I'd love to, I'm very interested in notation and handwritten charts. So I'd love to see.
Oh yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, I guess I would just have to scan it. I'll do that as soon as we're done.
I'd love to. I'd love to see it. One of my favorite pieces of yours is Ellenville. Maybe you can talk about a little bit what the story behind that song is and how you wrote it, and what do you remember when you think of that piece?
At some point a few years ago, I think I got an email from the Chamber of Commerce of Ellenville, which is a town in upstate New York, asking about that piece and what's my connection to the city, and I had to tell them that I'd never been there. I only saw when I would drive upstate, I would see signs for Ellenville, and at the time I wrote it, I had a girlfriend named Ellen. And put the two together. Yeah. And that's the entire story in that tune title. The tune itself has just kind of started like any other tune. I just started sort of fooling around on the guitar and came up with this arpeggio pattern, and just kind of like a very simple 1/4 thing, but it's sort of a specific finger picking pattern, and kind of just went from there. Mm-hmm. I think the melody was not the first idea. That came later after I had the setting.
Mm-hmm. I love that you have the blues inside. In the middle, there's a little sort of slow blues form.
Well, I wanted it to come out on a jazz label, so
yeah, that makes sense.
My concession. Yeah, that's funny. Someone else pointed that out to me about that tune. I never really thought about. I guess it is sort of technically 1/4/5. But blues was about the last thing I was thinking of at that moment. Yeah. A couple of motifs in the guitar part, and then a couple of motifs in the vocal melody that are pretty much form the basis for the whole tune. So it just, one way or another, explore those. I got one really horrible review for that record. And the reviewer was particularly incensed that I would play a bunch of random guitar arpeggios for 14 minutes. Like, why would I put the listener through that?
Yeah. So, quoting "There's No Greater Love" on that tune, is it also like a message to you?
Oh no, I did that?
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, that's pretty subtle. Yeah, no, good catch.
I mean, isn't it? Was it then like a message to Ellen or whatever? I'm just now trying to put the dots together. Now you said it's for a lady.
You can put more dots together than actually exist, I guess. But no, that was definitely not conscious. That's way more subtle than I would ever be able to conceive of.
For me, it was always like, wow, why is he putting "There's No Greater Love" quote in his composition? That takes some courage,
But I mean, rhythmically, it's completely different, isn't it?
Of course. It's just those notes. If you add them up together, it sounds
there's
like
only 12 of them. I mean, eventually you're going to end up quoting "There is no greater love" at some point in your life, it's funny. It reminds me of many years ago, I was traveling with the Maria Schneider band, and sometimes some of the concerts were filmed, and sometimes they would play the film of the concert in the tour bus the next day, and people would watch it. And I think we were playing the tune El Viento when we were watching it, and Greg Gisbert goes to me, "Hey, nice people quote, by the way, last night." And I'm like, "What? I quoted people?" And then just at that moment, I look up in there, and then I'm just like really verbatim, just quoting people, and really with expression, I had no idea I'd done that.
Yeah. Some things are very deep down inside of us.
Yeah, or similar melodies occur to the same people. And,
sure, yeah.
But maybe I was just ripping it off unconsciously. I don't know. It wouldn't be the first time.
How is it then? You have a finished piece, and then you maybe assemble tunes for a record. Any one of those records. What was the process of then rehearsing it with with the band? Like, how do you learn the tunes together?
Well, in the case of Hydra, part of the reason it took a long time is that we kind of recorded one of the more ambitious pieces at a time. I was fortunate that everybody was such a great reader and hard worker and just intuitively knew how to interpret the music without me really having to provide much guidance. So I would go over to Schooley's house maybe just a couple of times, talk things down. I think I probably gave him something to play along with. Maybe I just played into a recording device, the guitar part. Didn't rehearse all that much. And Ted is just he's just an amazingly intuitive player and just got inside music immediately. So it wasn't as much rehearsing as you'd think. Just a few times maybe for each piece. But then that adds up because there are a number of pieces. And then 39 was just Ted and me, so I'd go over to his house, and again maybe it was just 2 or 3 times for that piece. And Theo recorded all his parts completely separate after all the rhythm tracks were down. It just seemed like the most efficient way to do it. Just because his part was just so involved. He needed the freedom and the time to take his time with it. Yeah, you guys have a strong relationship. Yeah. And you've done so many great things together. Well, over 25 years we've been performing as a duo anyway. Yeah, and you seem like a perfect fit. He seems to bring all the stuff that you kind of need for your music. Yeah, someone once told me that he is the voice of my emotions. Wow, I thought that was an interesting way to put it. But when I don't even necessarily write for voice as much, but I write melodies, and I generally hear that sound interpreting the melody as opposed to an instrument or even any other singer. So usually, we've sort of grown into each other in an aesthetic way. Do you sometimes sing it when you compose? Do you sing then that part, or how do you do it? Like his part, would you sing it at home just for yourself too? Yeah, sometimes I do that. Sometimes I'll use a cheesy voice patch on a keyboard. I wonder how that sounds. Yeah. Well, it sounds better than me trying to sing it, I'll tell you that much. But when I'm just getting ideas, sometimes I'll definitely sing along with the guitar part that I'm playing. Yeah. But where does this affiliation for the voice come from? I mean, it's not the usual. I mean, sure. I mean, guitar and singing. That's a pretty big concept that everybody uses. But it's probably from our duo because I may never have come to that decision to use voice as my main melodic instrument, except that we started. He invited me to do some gigs with him as a duo before I knew him, probably 1993. And, that was immediately, felt very sympathetic. And, I just loved the amount of freedom he gave me as an accompanist. And we had, kind of similar aesthetic visions, that you could say, or complementary anyway. So I had this duo, and at the same time I was... I had a trio where I was playing my original music in a trio setting, and at a certain point, I just thought, what would it sound like if Theo just reinforced some of the melodies that I'm trying to play? Because some of the parts are involved, and maybe the melody's not coming out as much as I'd like it to. So at first, I had him just join us on a gig, and we were just doing the trio music, but with voice, as I said, reinforcing the melody lines, and I just liked the way that sounded. Yeah. And so it kind of stemmed from that. It was, almost by accident. And of course, I've always been interested in I've been listening to rock music since I was a little kid, and always valued, song as a form. And I still feel like no matter how complex my tunes get, which they're not even very complex at all, but I'm always trying to find sort of lyrical melodies that I resonate with. Even if the lyricism is subtle or sort of oblique, that's something that I've always valued so far. It's evident when you listen to your music. I might abandon that completely, which maybe I should, after a while, but just do something alyrical, just to see what happens. Yeah, but so far that's been sort of a consistent thread, I feel, that I'm trying to accomplish.
What's your process of finding new sounds on the guitar, finding new ways to voice a chord, to, through you I found these major flat 9 voicings, sharp 9 voicings, and, introducing these notes, wrong notes, and make them sound right, and so right. That was really an eye opener for me, hearing you play those, and also really living a note that might sound wrong in the first moment, but
it's all about context, right?
Yeah.
Having a sharp 15 or whatever is not super adventurous, really, in the grand scheme of harmony. But you can make a good case for it if the context suggests that it's the right place to go, and and if you're hearing it, and if it's voiced effectively. Usually if I put a flat 9 on a major 7 chord, it's at least a couple of octaves above the root, where it's still, that sounds like actually a very bright sound to me. Like a Lydian flat 2 scale is not a dark sound at all, but it's very, very bright. I've always been interested in harmony and been interested in new ways of expressing organized sound, I guess, trying to get out of my comfort zone and get out of what I'm familiar with, and maybe in some way trying to emulate the music that I really love from classical composers. Yeah,
can you name a couple of composers that you really?
Well, it was corny to say it, but Bartók has been, ever since I was like 16, has been a huge inspiration for me.
What are your favorite pieces?
Oh, too many to name, but I'm particularly fond of the string quartets.
Which one?
Absolutely all of them. But I did a pretty detailed analysis of the third quartet for school once. So maybe the second is my favorite, but really all of them. I love the romanticism of the first.
Yeah, I was going to say, so beautiful melodies in there.
Yeah, and
what's the one that starts with this chord?
I might be. Oh, yes.
Which one starts with, I don't know if it's the right key, but which one starts?
I think that is the third. I think that's the third, right?
Yeah.
And it, that chord and then
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know if I dreamt this or if I heard it, but isn't the way it starts is kind of an inversion of the C-sharp minor quartet by the Beethoven 131. Wasn't that the inspiration for that?
Whoa, I don't know. I don't know. I have to go back and listen to them.
Yeah, check it out. I think it's the same theme, like upside down.
Okay, I will.
Or
wow.
I might be misremembering. I particularly like the second piano concerto. I love the third also, which I did an analysis of that. But
it's the second one with the fifths.
Yes, the fifth, the fifth's moving contrary. Yeah. That's just like, who thinks of that,
Yeah. Yeah.
Strings, percussion, and celeste.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I could go on, but he was a big inspiration. Ligeti is another one, curiously from the same part of the world. I actually am old enough to have seen 2001 when it came out. That was kind of a mind-blowing experience for a 6-year-old.
I guess so. 6 years you're old, and when you saw that, wow.
Yeah, so I was kind of fucked for life.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's like giving a little kid a giant hit of acid.
Wow.
And
did your parents take you to
my dad took me, yeah.
Wow. I guess it wouldn't happen today, right? I mean, a dad taking a 6-year-old to see a movie like that.
Well, what movie is like that? I don't know.
That's true.
What's an analog?
That's true. I mean, the culture of parents showing their kids, whatever stuff, it's a different now, I think, than it was back then. It was a little bit more loose.
Although there's no violence, there's nothing overtly that one would object to. It's just very deep and sort of disturbing and an intense experience. But I think my dad would have absolutely taken me, no matter what.
Yeah. My daughter is going to be 6 in 1.5 years. I can't really imagine her seeing that ape scene in the beginning with that music.
Well, if you don't want her to end up like me, you should probably keep her away from it.
Well, if she'll play guitar like you. Well, but how did we get there?
Like that's just that
Ligeti.
voice, the vocal music.
Yeah.
That really stuck with me. In conjunction with the visual, it just kind of like it struck some kind of a chord that's sort of still resonating. Mm-hmm. So yeah, he's a big inspiration as well. I also really love Elliott Carter. A lot of his works. Yeah. Somewhere deep down, I'm sort of trying to approximate some of these sounds on the guitar, not very successfully, but this is part of what gives me inspiration to just explore things.
Mm-hmm. Are there any works for guitar from classical composers that particularly inspired you?
I used to have the I don't know what happened to it, but I had the great Julian Bream record, 20th Century Guitar. Wait, is that what it's called?
Yeah, there's one of those. Yeah, I have a big box of his music, but I think one of the CDs is called 20th Century Guitar Music.
Yeah, let's see. There's a Benjamin Britten piece on there. There's Hans Werner Henze piece.
Oh yeah, these are deep pieces.
Yeah. Anyway, that was a very inspirational record. Also, a couple of Leo Brouwer records.
Who's Leo Brouwer?
A really great Cuban composer. I think he mainly writes for guitar. And really very harmonically adventurous and expansive and really lyrical. Just really great stuff. Mm-hmm. Carter himself has a great piece for classical guitar called Changes. Sort of tried to look at a couple of times. Somewhat younger composer Jason Eckhart has a couple of really great guitar pieces. You should, if you're not familiar with him, he's one of my favorite current composers.
Jason Eckhart. Okay.
Yeah, one called I'm blanking out on the name of this piece. I mean, I really love the piece, but part of the fascination is that it's something so beyond my comprehension and ability to execute. I just love the fact that it exists and that somebody can play it. Like, but he's someone that's developed a serial language to a really sophisticated degree, but it still has an edge and even like a lyricism that they really respond to, and just like great lines and great textures. But to be honest, I don't listen to classical guitar like all that much. All that being said, don't even listen to music as much as I'd like to, because if I'm in the process of preparing or writing myself or practicing something to be recorded, I'm just kind of consumed with that.
Sure.
And like time for concentrated listening kind of gets lost a little bit. So I have to sometimes really consciously, periodically set aside an hour that I'm just going to sit. I'm not going to do anything else but just put on the headphones and actually really check out some music.
What's the last thing that you checked out which really touched you on a deep level?
The Schubert String Quintet in C with the two cellos. That is, literally the last thing that I listened to in a deep way, maybe just a couple of days ago. It's something
Which recording?
The Emerson Quartet with Rostropovich on the second cello. Mm-hmm. It's a piece I used to listen to in school a lot. For some reason, I don't know how I came across it. It's not like I'm an expert on Schubert or anything, but it always really, like, that piece just is so strong. It really hit me. It's very sort of Beethovenian. And then, I don't know, I just decided to check it out again and found a different recording, which is the Emerson, which really surpassed the one that I knew. Usually if you're really familiar with a performance, even if one is maybe technically better, you're so used to the one that it sounds wrong. But in this case, it was like it just blew the other one away. So I would definitely recommend that performance if you're interested.
Yeah, I'll check it out. With Schubert, I really like the impromptus for piano. Mm-hmm. But I have a...
Yeah, honestly, I just listened to the one in A flat last night.
A flat, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the... This one, right? It's my favorite. But I have a problem with all the repetition, There's so much repetition in it, and every section gets at least played twice in that piece. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's not always the case with him, right? But
I'm not sure if it's always the case, but at least in the impromptus, that happens a lot, That's something in your music that... parts get repeated, but it rarely feels like a repetition. If you like follow a thought for so long, a lot of people get caught up in using repetition all the time, just repeating one thought, but you take that thought on a journey, right? In that way, that although there is repetition in your music, it never feels like a loop or something.
Well, it's much more interesting to see how an idea can be transformed and still retain its initial integrity, right? So, I mean, that's the whole idea behind developing an idea, right? Mm-hmm. Developing an idea is not repeating an idea; it's taking it somewhere else, imaginative. Yeah. That's where you can actually see somebody's mind taking a journey.
Yeah.
The decisions behind how the thing grows.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what you mean by repetition, whether you mean like literal repetition or just consistent adherence to an idea.
I actually meant that I have the feeling there's less things in a loop in your music as opposed to other composers, other musicians. As you said before, like taking an idea on a journey and seeing where it can go, that kind of puts all that boredom that can come out of repetition or repeating something aside, because the song is going on. It's a feeling that I love when I hear your music. Like I'll know that after the first minute, my ears won't be bored in a way of okay, we'll be stuck here for a while now, and in a way I don't have to listen. You know what I mean? I like when I get forced to listen, because you end up somewhere in a composition, and then you feel like maybe it gets looped once or something, but then in the second loop you already go somewhere else. There's a change there. You might end up in another place than you would have thought, and I really like that about your music, that the journey is continuing. Although there's, of course, we play over certain parts or something.
Right. Well, if I'm trying to do anything, it's to sort of recreate the most valuable experiences that I've had as a listener, and being taken on a journey, whether it's listening to a great solo, that unfolds in like logical but unexpected ways, or a great, long piece of classical music, or a piece like that, or an experience like that invites you in and like takes you somewhere where you've never been. Makes you feel emotions that you didn't maybe even know existed. Yeah. So if I'm trying to do anything, it's to maybe provide that experience to whoever might want to listen to what I'm doing. What else are we really doing this for,
Can you maybe tell me a couple of the memorable listening experiences that you had, living in New York City, watching all the greats play? Things that really changed your way of looking at music, changed your playing?
There are a few things, some of my like really most memorable and valuable early listening, like live listening experiences are maybe some of the most important. And when I was maybe 17 or 18, I would go down to the Jazz Forum, which was like a loft space. I think it was a $5 cover charge, and you bring your own libations and whatever other music-enhancing substances you might have in it. Things were pretty relaxed, and used to see a lot of stuff there. So Bob Berg had a really great quintet there. They used to play there a lot with Al Foster and Tom Harrell. So it was called the Bob Berg Tom Harrell Quintet, I believe. And I would just sit there like maybe a foot from the drums and basically not move for 3 sets. It was really intense. Maybe just because it was a different time, or just because I was so much younger, I could really be engaged for 3 full sets of music. Yeah. And saw George Coleman there. I used to see Joe Henderson at the Vanguard a lot, and that was always kind of a mind-blowing experience. Yeah.
Which bands?
Al Foster and Ron Carter, that trio. A few times, and then he also had saw him play quartet with Fred Hirsch, which was amazing. Yeah. Yeah, always lots of fun to see Joe.
Yeah. Did you ever get to play with him?
Oh no. Another really great sort of unexpected experience was when maybe I was like 19 and went out for like a late night snack to a nearby Howard Johnson's, and attached to that Howard Johnson's was like this nightclub called the Ultra Lounge, and this is up in Westchester. And I had John Scofield's record Rough House, and just played it all the time. Like it's just a great record. And so sitting there eating like maybe it's like 11 p.m. and through the door that leads to the nightclub, I'm hearing this stuff that kind of sounds like Rough House. I'm like, who? That sounds like John Scofield playing at the Sour Johnson's. Like, what the fuck is going on? So I walk in there, and there he is with that trio, with Steve Swallow and Adam Nussbaum, playing for like 4 people. And so fortunately, that was their first of 4 Sunday nights that they had at that place. So I just went back every week, and
great.
It was, again, like for next to nothing, got to see like 2 or 3 sets. I was able to take a lesson with him.
What was that lesson like?
Well, he was playing some of his originals and played this version of like Girl from Ipanema that just blew my top of my head off, like, so like, how do you interpret a because I was sort of learning standards and could sort of navigate my way through the changes, but he was playing so freely over it, and just playing all these notes that were probably wrong, or it just sounded amazing, but I had no idea what was going on. So my first question to him was, how do you play out? Which, I didn't realize how naive a question that was, being 19 myself, but he just looked at me like, I don't know. And he showed me this one pentatonic lick where you like play this pentatonic and you go upwards in half steps over it.
You still know how it's going, right?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever actually used that one.
But these experiences of early lessons, they stay with you, right?
Yeah, no, I remember everything. I learned a couple of his, licks.
Yeah.
And I played them back at him, and I think he was a little taken aback. He was like, "What?" And I said, "Well, what are you doing here?" And he said, "Oh, that's like a Woody Shaw solo or something." Or it was a fun experience. It was probably more fun just to hang out with him for an hour. I've met him since. He doesn't remember the lesson at all. I keep telling him that I'm ready for my second one, but we haven't been able to schedule that.
Wow. What are a couple of other guitar heroes from early on in your life that you really looked up to and that you learned a lot from by listening or getting to know them also?
Jim Hall probably made the biggest impact just as far as how it influenced the way I approach improvisation. Obviously, his economy and his sort of compositional approach to improvising and his like textural command of the instrument. Really exploiting what's possible as far as like density and sort of orchestration on the guitar. And his really deep-rootedness in the jazz tradition, along with like fearless adventurousness, which is like really evident on the Jim Hall live, the recording from Toronto in the 70s. They put out, the box set that came out from that.
It's amazing how he plays there.
Yeah.
And it's always so exciting when he plays. You never know what's going to happen.
Exactly. Yeah, he's really improvising.
Yeah.
And it's the ultimate example of just like inevitable surprise,
Totally, yeah.
And Pat Martino, totally different approach, but equally compelling to me. Just the momentum, sound, the feel, intensity. It's very, very inspiring. If I want to feel like I want to play better on a gig, I'll just like listen to a Pat Martino record, and it just like automatically makes me play a little bit better. Somehow.
I know that feeling. Yeah, you pick out somebody that gives you a lift, no matter when you listen to him. Yeah,
kind of vibrate some chord in you.
I have the feeling that there are either these players who make you feel like I'll never be able to get there, right? Or there are these players who...
Yeah, Alan Holdsworth is one of those.
Yeah, true.
Obviously.
Or there are these players like, let's go back to that analogy of going to the cinema. I remember as a kid when I used to go see adventure movies or like kids movies where at the end you went outside of the cinema and you're like, I can do this too. I can beat the bad guys too,
Right.
And I have that feeling with a couple of musicians too, either that one, I'll never be able to get there, or after listening to them, you feel like, like encouraged, somebody gives you courage to go there, right?
Yeah, maybe there's a humanness that remains, and for all the prowess, it's something immediately relatable.
Yeah.
As opposed to something alien.
Yeah.
Not to say one's better than the other at all, but just take the relative value of each one.
Yeah. Maybe you can describe a little bit your memories of working together with Paul Motian in his band, also on your recording as well.
The first time, I used to go see, there was another live listening experience, was when, seeing him with Joe Lovano and Bill Frisell. And I used to follow them around and see that trio as much as I could. And their first record, it should have happened a long time ago, was really a huge record for me.
Yeah.
So obviously I'm a huge fan. And then I think it was 1992, joined his electric bebop band. They had a gig, and at that point it was just 2 guitars and electric bass and him.
The other one being Brett Shepik, or?
No, but it was already 2 guitars. So it was Kurt Rosenwinkel and Brett Shepik and Stoma Takeshi. And then for some reason he called me and he decided he wanted to do this one gig with 3 guitars. Not sure why.
Did you know him before?
I thought it was a prank phone call, because how does Paul Motian even know my number? And this was like way before email. So I joined them for this sort of odd gig at the Knitting Factory where we're playing standards. There might be a tape of it somewhere. A lot of strings being vibrated up there. And another weird thing that made that gig a little strange was everybody thought there was going to be the New York version of the LA riots that night, which didn't happen. But nobody came out. It was like very sparse attendance to that gig because everyone's cowering in their house. So that was my first experience playing with him. I mean, I had fun. I don't know, what he thought. But then I didn't hear him, nothing happened with that. And he just continued with the 2 guitars for another 10 years or so. And then I guess I joined the band slightly more permanently in 2001 or so. Just did a tour and at that point it was Steve Cardenas and Chris Cheek and Pietro Tonolo and Anders Christensen.
Yeah.
And so we did a tour in 2001 maybe, and then another one the next year, and recorded some records. The experience of that was, it's funny, it's a little bit different from the small group stuff that I did with him because his concept was very, concise forms, short solos, kind of very regimented and regulated in a way. And yet we had to find a way to free the pieces up even within those constraints. So that was an interesting challenge.
Would he verbalize that, play short solos, or?
Oh yeah. Well, he wouldn't say play short solos, but he would say you have 16 bars. Okay, that's a short solo.
Yeah.
Or one chorus and then trade with this guy, and it was all pretty planned out, because if you
also
if you
live.
have
when you would play live too.
Oh yeah. So we'd fit 14 tunes in a set sometimes. But it was it was fun because concept just permeates the whole thing, and he made it sound like Paul Motian music, somehow. And then it was slightly different experience playing with Tim with Bill McHenry's quartet because I was just a lot more freedom built in to that.
That's Roses, right? There's a record called Roses. I think I heard Roses.
Yeah, a couple, Roses and Ghosts of the Sun, I think it's called, which actually they both came out of the same recording session, but were released years apart.
What did you learn from Paul Motian? What you consider a big lesson from him that you can maybe put into words?
How carefree and light and yet absolutely serious he was about music. He cared about nothing so much as the integrity of the music. But at the same time, he's never dogmatic about anything, and he projects absolute freedom and adventurousness. To transcend an instrument like that is really something special. You always know that it's Paul playing. Yeah. Through some kind of weird alchemical thing that he can do. He can be so supportive and yet so independent at the same time. So whatever situation he's in, his vision sort of permeates the whole experience. And it invites you into that, and it invites you to access the same thing in yourself.